welcome to our kitchen. Today we're going to be making a garden to table soup, and this is going to be part of our channels From the Garden series. Today we'll be making a soup that's popular in Cantonese culture. Here in the San Gabriel Valley there are restaurants called Hong Kong cafes, and when you order an entree you're likely to receive this soup with it. It is a borscht. It's originally from Russia, although you can trace it back even further. There was a time when there were Russians in China, and then they brought this soup into Hong Kong, and that's where it became popular. There, as I understand it, a deviation from the original, this soup doesn't include beets, and we have everything from our garden to make the soup, so it's pretty cool. This is the first time I'll be making the soup, and not the first time that I've had it, because I really enjoy the Hong Kong cafes that are here, and I enjoy getting this soup with my entree. This is known in Cantonese as Luo Song Tong. Luo Song is Cantonese for Russian, or maybe even Soviet, and then Tong means soup. The ingredients are going to be cabbage, so that's a primary ingredient. We have a cabbage from our garden. This is a New Brunswick cabbage that we grew. And then we have some tomatoes. These are the Costoluto Genovese tomatoes. They're great for making soups and sauces because they have a nice sweet yet acidic flavor. So we have some that we picked today, some nice red ripe tomatoes, and then we picked one that's not so ripe that it's soft. It's like almost ripe, and this is perfect because we're going to reserve some of these this tomato, and we're going to cook it towards the end so that we can get some tomatoes that are still biteable. So we have quite a bit, and we have some more on our counter in case we need more. So once again, this is something that I've never made, and there's not really a recipe, but rather there's a process, and then we go and add things as we go along if it needs more something or another. The other thing we have are onions. So we got onions from our garden as well. So we'll pile this up over here out of our harvesting basket. By the way, if you're wondering about this basket, this is actually a sifter that they use for gold mining. This is called Garrett's, what's it called? Garrett's combination sifter. And we didn't blanch our celery, so you'll notice that it's quite green. So there's a lot of intense celery flavor in here. That's why I harvested 3 stalks. Carrots, we have some carrots. These are new Kuroda carrots, one of my favorite types of carrots to grow. They're crunchy and sweet. And when it comes to carrots, we just go and harvest until we have enough. So we pulled 3, and this looks to be enough. And the last ingredient are potatoes. So these are magic molly potatoes. They are purple on the inside. They're very dense. They're the drier type. These are very reminiscent of the Peruvian fingerling potato that we've grown before. So the heirloom fingerling potato we've grown before. So these are magic mollies, and this is what we have available in the garden. We are always planting potatoes in succession, so the strategy for that is when we go and get our harvest, we'll save 1 or 2 and set it aside, wait for it to chit. Once it chits, we'll put it in the garden because we're probably pulling something out and we'll have some space to have them. So as we saw, when we harvested these potatoes, we have another set of potatoes that went right in after some amendment of compost to the soil. Those are the Huckleberry Gold potatoes that just went in. So let's get into it. We're going to start with the process. Our strategy today is to cook the soup first, and then we want to tenderize our beef. We're going to be using a chuck steak that we've cut, and we're not going to be using beef bones today. There's going to be plenty of flavor in this soup. So we're going to start by letting that stew break down the meat so it's nice and tender. We're going to want that process to also break down the onions, and then we want the tomatoes to break down and become part of the soup. So I guess it's called emulsify or something like that. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start with these, and then we'll come back and process these later on. So let's set these aside. With the cabbage, we want it a little bit on the soft side, so we're going to, as the soup gets more flavorful and finishes up, we'll put in the cabbage, then we'll throw in the carrots, the potatoes, and the celery. So we're going to throw in the celery at the same time as the cabbage. We don't want the celery to be too mushy as well. So I got my peeler. I'll set this aside. And we'll set the tomatoes aside first, because the first thing we want to do is we want to cut up the onions so that we can get it to brown and brown it with the meat. We also have all the things that we're not using. We'll be putting it into that bowl to separate out. It's going to be compost. It'll feed our other plants. And some of the items can be used as snacks for our pets. So we have chickens, ducks, tortoises, and rabbits out there. So they can enjoy that. Otherwise, it's mostly going to go to the earthworms. With the onions peeled, we're going to rough chop them. They're not going to need to be finely chopped because we're going to be stewing them, and they'll break down and emulsify with the soup. So we'll chop these up first, and then we'll get them in the pan. We'll brown them. After they browned a little bit, we'll throw in our protein, which is our chuck steak, and we'll brown that up. Then afterwards, we throw in the onions, and the onions are pretty strong, starting to tear up, which is a good time to move them to the back, and we'll start cooking them. We have our onions and our protein in the back browning away, and this is the style of cooking that I like. I call it the run and gun. We have things that are in progress, and as that's in progress, we're preparing the next step and getting ingredients in. There's a different way, which is the wok way, the Chinese fast cooking way. You prepare all your ingredients, it goes and gets blasted, and it comes out. But this is a run and gun where we're just chopping and getting it in as we're going. So next, we're going to get the tomatoes. We're going to get the nice ripe ones to get into the pot so that it can then start to break down. One of the things about the Costoluto tomato is that it's great for these, as I mentioned in the beginning, these types of dishes. And we're just going to take the tops off. I'm going to start by cutting them in half. I might cut them in fourths. The reason I'm kind of debating is because I'm wanting to skip a step, which is to blanch these tomatoes and peel the skin that's hard to eat. But rather, I'm going to cut them into quarters, and then we can then fish them out of our soup later on. So either way works. I might even cut them into eighths, depending on how the sizes are. And afterwards, we can also get this into the pot to brown before we add the water to make it into the soup. There looks to be a good amount of tomato here for however much we're making. So I'm going to stop here and get this into the pot. And then we're going to slightly cover the lid and let it simmer for at least 2 hours so that the beef is nice and tender. As we're waiting for that, we'll now start to chop our other ingredients and have it ready. We're going to cut this. There's more cabbage here than we need, so I'm going to peel off some of that outer wrapping. It has a little bit of bug damage, so we'll just take that out. Let's bisect our cabbage and see what it looks like on the inside. It feels pretty heavy, so it seems like it's nice and clustered. Sometimes when you grow a cabbage, it can get a little bit loose, so we got a nice packed in cabbage. I'm going to start with half a head here and see. I'm going to actually use this smaller one. I think there's going to be quite a bit. No, actually, I'm going to switch up because I forgot there's the heart here. That's a lot of cabbage that we're not going to be using. Okay, so we'll throw that part there. And the heart is great for the rabbits to chew on. Let's take that heart out. And so that's what we're left with. And let's cut this in half. And then we'll cut them into about maybe, I would say, 1 square inch pieces. We'll try to go for that size. This one we're going to cut in half. And if you want to, these harder, denser heart parts, you can cook them with the broth as you're wanting to emulsify the broth. They're great to cook at that, to give extra time cooking, because then it will be nice and tender by the time they get pulled out. If we cook these harder pieces towards the end, they might be a little bit too hard. But that all depends on your preference for the texture, and that's the great thing about doing your own cooking. You can control the texture. So if you prefer the heart part, you can include it, and you want it nice and crunchy, you can put it towards the end. So that's what we have. I think this is a very good amount for however much soup we're making. So this is plenty. We'll set that right there. The next thing that we're going to prep are our carrots. So we'll just cut off the ends here. Start by cutting off the ends. And then these carrot tops we'll just put into our compost bowl up top there. Got these right here. And this one, since we have a good amount, we'll just give this to the rabbit. So we'll just reserve that for the rabbit. And now we go ahead and peel our carrots. The key to growing carrots is to make them chase water, and that means that we're not watering all the time. With our soil medium, which is mostly clay, it holds a good amount of water. We water until regularly until they sprout, and once they get to about an inch, we start to cut back the watering down to a week to sometimes even a month. So that depends on how wet it is outside and whether we get rain and the temperatures outside. So, and those are our carrots. Let's move some of these cabbages off to the side so you can see us getting into carrots. And this one is pretty thick, so we'll cut it in half, and then we'll then cut it into bite-sized pieces. There are different ways to have carrot in soup. You can leave them in big sections like this if you prefer a texture like that. For most of the soups that I like them a little bit more on the small side. All right, the next thing we have are the potatoes. And we have this nice big one here. I'm actually going to leave this one to chit and grow our next harvest of potatoes. And I'm just trying to decide how many potatoes we need. So we'll just get the larger ones and we'll use those. Surprisingly, when it comes to potatoes, it's very easy to overuse them, to think that we need more than the dish requires. So that's something that I've learned from experience. We're going to cut them to about the same size as the carrots. So you can, once again, cut them to however size you prefer. They have this really dark purple color. Sometimes it's almost glowing. And with the knife, I'm sliding as I'm cutting. So that's a good way to cut potatoes. Push down and slide forward on the knife, and it slices our potatoes. All right, last is our celery, and we're just gonna cut it in a couple of ways. We're gonna cut that portion, the leafy part, off, and then we're going to cut the celery into a little bit bigger pieces because we want some of that crunch. So that's what we have. And then the leaves we're going to cut up nice and small and put them into the broth as it's cooking. The broth, we're going to use it to flavor it. So we're going to cut it up real good. And there we have it. We'll add these once the broth is coming to an end. As far as when to add the rest of our ingredients, I would say with the celery and the cabbage, roughly 35 minutes before the soup is ready to be served. The carrots, tomato, potatoes, those go in about 25 minutes before. And we're gonna test the soup and always season to taste towards the end. So that's gonna be when we add our final ingredients, and we'll just wait for our soup to be ready. I think we're about 2 hours in, and this is what our soup looks like. All of the liquid is from the tomatoes, the onions, and our chuck roast. This is a good illustration of how nice of a paste tomato these Costoluto Genovese are, and we can use them for sauce. But with this soup, the broth is actually more soupy, so we want to add water. And during this process, we can also remove some of the skin that is in here. So what we want to do is we want to get this soup to more of a broth consistency. So we add water, and that's going to depend on the thickness of your sauce that you have and how much water you want to add. So we're close to there. It's still a little bit thicker than we would like, but we have remaining ingredients that may release additional water, so we'll see how it goes. Here's our Cantonese Hong Kong style borscht. In Cantonese, once again, it's called Luo Song Tong. And you'll notice that the soup is more brothy. If you like it more thick, then add less water. And also, if you also like more cabbage, then add more cabbage. So we're gonna ladle this into our bowl here. This is a little bit more than the typical amount that you receive at a restaurant. And then you get a very sparing piece of beef. Okay, so this is mostly the broth that we're after, and also the fresh veggies from the garden. And from our garden, we have Chinese borscht, otherwise known as Luo Song Tong in Cantonese. Let's give it a taste test. We're gonna try the broth first. It's really good. It's got the celery flavor in there. It's got a good amount. The tomatoes are perfect. This is one of the ones that we like to grow because it's got that perfect acidity and tomato flavor. We don't have to add more acid into this soup. Something like a lemon, we don't need to add. Let's try next the cabbage. That's the other main ingredient here. Let's give it a taste. The cabbage is perfect. It's got a nice crunch, and also it maintains its elastic texture, and that's really good about this cabbage. All right, the next thing we're gonna try are the potatoes. These are not the typical russet potatoes. These are gonna be more earthy in flavor. And let's try it. That's good. I'm gonna get a little bit more of that broth to help wash down the potatoes. They are very earthy. Imagine a russet potato, maybe times 100%, 1000% on the earthiness. Surprisingly, the potatoes, once you bite into it, it turns soft. So if you were to stir fry or to fry this potato, it actually stays pretty dry. So really good potato for this soup. What else do we have in here? We have the carrots. Let's try the carrots. This is the new Kuroda carrot. Before I go any further, the cabbage is the New Brunswick cabbage. And then we have the Magic Molly potato. And now we have this new Kuroda potato. It's one of my favorite, carrot. It's one of my favorite varieties because it's good and sweet, and it's also crunchy. And It's got a really good carrot flavor. It's sweet, and it has that almost celery-like flavor that you find in carrots. That was a bigger piece, and it was a little bit on the firm side. I bet the smaller pieces will be just the right texture for me, which is it holds together when you initially bite it, and it turns really soft and almost melts. The last thing is the celery. I expect it to be really strong in flavor because, once again, we didn't blanch it. It's got all that chlorophyll and all that flavor. So let's give it a try. It's good and crunchy, and definitely tastes like celery. I probably would have cooked it a little bit more, but overall, this is a really good soup. And once again, it's from our garden. It's fresh. We made it today, and we made it together. If you're curious about what I normally order when I go to the Hong Kong cafe, I don't deviate much. I usually get the 2 delicacy on rice, and that's where you pick the protein. You can pick from the barbecues. I normally go with roast duck and a soy sauce chicken, or one of those free-range chickens that are steamed. The other types of barbecues you can pick are roast pork and char siu. But for me, it's the roast duck and the chicken. And roast duck is one of my favorite things to eat, and it's also one of the cooking videos that I've done. And you may want to check that out if you want to see how a roast duck is made. And lastly, when you go to cafe, you cannot leave without ordering what's called a dongling cha, which is Cantonese for cold lemon tea. So it's a sweetened tea. It's like an Arnold Palmer, but they brew the tea in a very concentrated manner, and it's very addictive. And if you go late in the day and you drink a bunch of this, and I am very caffeine sensitive, I'll be up until 3 a.m. So yeah, really, really good drink. You get lemon slices in it, you mash it with the spoon they provide, and then typically there's a straw, but I like to drink drinks out of the glass. Really refreshing today, especially today's a warmer day here in Southern California. And with that, I'm very happy to share with you a demo on how we make, or how I make, this borscht. And this is the first time I've ever made it. A lot of the From the Garden videos are dishes that I enjoy eating from at the restaurant, or from people who make it, or from my family who's made it. And some of these are comfort foods. And a lot of the times these are dishes that we're making together as a demo here on YouTube. So thank you for watching and seeing how this dish is made. I hope you find this dish at a restaurant to try, and even better if you make it at home from ingredients from your garden or from the market. And until the next From the Garden video, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this one. It was fun making it together with you, and we'll see you in the next one.